Hi, this is Chris Howard, host of Plugged In with Chris Howard, and I'm taking the Lions over the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. BetOnline has free odds and lines available online or on your mobile device. Visit BetOnline today.
If you travel, you know when it comes to love.
See you soon.
Can't wait. The sky is no limit. You know with your Delta Amex card, being oceans apart means meeting in Aruba. And booking a war travel with your card means saving 15% on Delta flights. You know kissing under the bridge of sighs guarantees eternal love. Because you're the long-distance lovebirds. It's why you're a Delta SkyMiles Platinum American Express card member. If you travel, you know. Take off 15 discount not applicable to partner-operated flights or taxes and fees. Terms apply. Visit go.amex/you-know.
Welcome to the Media Roundtable, where we talk to leading voices across the podcast and audio universe about what they create, why they create it, and the impact they want it to have on the world. This is our industry edition, where we go a little further behind the scenes to talk about the business of audio and the secrets of the craft, which allows brands and creators to impact audiences and culture through the work they put out. I'm your host, Stew Redwine, VP Creative Services at Oxford Road, and we have a very special show for you today. We're calling it Sound Success, where we'll discuss the simple secrets to high-impact audio advertising. We're going to be talking about audio's resurgence, a few recent studies showcasing its positive emotional and performance benefits, and how we've seen elements of sonic branding play out in our work, and how taking creative risks in the audio space is well worth it. And today I'm joined by Stephen Abraham, president of Oxford Road. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, Stu. Glad to be here.
Good to have you. Neal Lucey, EVP of Strategy and Product.
Hi, Stu. It's great to be back.
Always, always. And Jennifer Laine, Head of Marketing, Innovation, and Special Projects.
Thrilled to be here, Stu. Thank you.
Love it. Stephen, Neal, Jennifer, welcome to the Media Roundtable. All right, so the first thing is, audio is having a moment right now. We've been with it since podcast, and it's continuing to surge, and then through the pandemic, it feels like it got supercharged. And right now, what we're seeing, a lot of folks saying, I just want to mention 3 studies real quick and quotes from those studies, and we can talk about this, is the impact that audio has on folks. I think, we saw audio first half of the 20th century, and then video comes into play, and then digital comes into play, and audio kind of falls back. And now the impact and the power that it has is something that everyone's taking a look at again. It's something we can consume on demand. It's incredibly intimate. It's inside of us. And the impact that it has on us is significant. So just 3 quick quotes. These are recent studies, like in the last month. Spotify advertising, their Sonic Science, their most recent study. Key takeaway from that one is recent advances in neuroscience show us that sound actually impacts us through every center of the brain. It affects the emotional, it affects memory, and the engagement centers alike. That's like everything advertising wants to do, right? Okay. Another one, Odyssey and Veritonic, their sound creative study, which we're going to talk about a lot. Ad Age just put out an article about as well. A key quote from that one of the top findings is that sonic branding boosts purchase intent and increases ad recall by double-digit percentages. Sonic branding is a unique and easily identified sound or jingle that consumers over time quickly connect to a product. Very Pavlovian, ring the bell, and the dog salivates for the food. And then from Amazon and Wondery, your emotion on audio with some specific numbers here. After listening to streaming audio sessions, the most common emotions reported by participants were positive. The happiness was at 60%. Optimistic is at 41%. I think that's because people are choosing the audio they want to listen to that makes them feel good. And then the first negative emotion, just to to give all the results here, was sad. And that was like in 6th place, and it was at 6%. So the large majority of folks, they're feeling good about the audio that they're choosing, and they feel better after they listen to it. So looking at these studies, looking at this moment that audio is having right now, just open it up to the group. What do you guys think about everything that's coming out right now about the impact that audio has on human behavior?
I'm happy to jump in because I think I found a couple of these studies and shared them with the organization. I think first and foremost, if you read The Influencer, and hopefully you do, we will have links to where listeners can download the studies from The Influencer. For me, I mean, it's interesting to me that so many of these studies came out sort of around the same time. So it's like that audio having its moment. And then what I found interesting was some of the commonalities that I took away. So for instance, conversational type advertising and podcasts was cited both in the Spotify Sonic Science report as well as the Odyssey Sound Creative report. So, and it just makes sense, right? That's the environment that you're running in, and that people are having a conversation. So to have that tone of voice and conversation with your podcast advertising works well in that environment, but doesn't necessarily work as well in radio, where you really have to grab more attention, kind of, from the Odyssey study. So I thought that it was interesting to see some of those commonalities across the studies. And I think the other thing that I thought about is, yes, these are studies that are put out by audio companies who's in their self-interest to promote audio. And I think sometimes you would think about these as implications for audio advertising, but they go beyond that. So, having memorable music, in your video creative is vitally important. Having that sonic branding in your video creative, vitally important. So while these will definitely make your audio advertising work harder, they'll make all of your advertising work harder, where you have at least sound as a component of that advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it ranges across everything. You even think about, I think about Ring, the Ring video doorbell, and the sound that the doorbell makes that's in the advertisements. And it was my understanding with that was something that they had to diminish on their television creative, because the Ring video doorbell sound, on the Pavlovian aspect of this, the dogs that can hear the Ring video doorbell commercial start barking because they're hearing the doorbell sound. Look no further for the training. But I'm curious also, Stephen, I'm grateful you were able to join. I mean, sometimes I feel like the approach to audio, coming from your previous experience and thinking of comms in a large picture, like audio can almost be treated as a left behind. It's like, oh, you guys are doing this TV spot. Oh yeah, we need to do some radio spots too. Like, when you think of it as the big picture and audio fitting into that and seeing what a massive impact it has, how do you think about that?
Very interesting observation you just make, because I've been in those meetings pre-prep before a client comes along, and the creative team are driving the agenda, and then say, oh goodness me, we need to think about radio as well, and quickly write a quick script 10 minutes as the client is coming up from the lobby, which is never great. No, I think every individual component is going to have its role, right? And I don't really see one being better or worse than the other, but at the same time, it has been perhaps an afterthought and an unnecessary one. I think some of the changes that we saw through the pandemic, where people had more time on their hands, whether that was actually more time to do more stuff, but they just actually were located in one environment, and to fill their time, they were consuming more variety of media. I think what's happened is audio's resurgence has actually is going to have you're going to get a double bite of the cherry, right? Because people started listening to it more during the pandemic. They were listening to more podcasts. But you could arguably say for the past 6 months, we've been returning to normalcy, but there's a hunger to get out there and do more things, right? And what platform is actually with you on the go? Whether you're in your car or whether it's directly in your ears. My behaviors of adoption of podcast or more audio have only become accentuated as we've returned to normalcy. I don't leave the house without having a preset list of what it is I want to listen to. I don't need, I've retrained my brain to get an amount of information from audio that I was only really satisfied with an AV component before. And so the power specifically of sonic branding is I think, is more and more on clients' agendas, and they're being more thoughtful about the type of creativity that you can put out there. The advent of AI and the methods with which we can develop executions being what they are, and the kind of technology that's there, I only see it as getting even more popular within marketing agendas and clients discussions. I read a recent report that was saying that it takes something like, I don't know, 50 milliseconds to recognize an image, but only milliseconds to actually recognize an audio sonic piece of branding. And so I think if we continue with that thought and the developments that are taking place from a tech innovation perspective with what you can do with sound and how you can surround your listener in different emotional ways, it is something that we should all consider even more in our briefing and in the development of the programs that we put together for our clients. Interesting that you say one of the negative emotions is sadness. I don't see it as a negative emotion. It can actually trigger a response. So if you're actually writing a piece of copy where you want to get an emotion of sadness because that's going to trigger a behavior, then so be it. Anger is not one that I want to get to, but sadness.
Yeah. And I mean, and sometimes it's like the list. How specific is the list? I mean, there's dimensions to sadness. Is nostalgia? If someone's feeling nostalgic,
Sure.
is there a piece of that or loss? Like, I mean, it's a great point. Audio has so much power.
Yeah.
We're waking up to the power. It isn't as much of an afterthought. It's now coming to the front of the mind. And so it's a piece of creative.
Yeah.
So audio is a piece of creative. And, Bill Bernbach of advertising fame is quoted in classrooms when they're teaching advertising is that creative is the last unfair advantage we're legally able to take over our competition, which is, it's a great inspiring quote about what can we do creatively and how much power there is to have a big idea, but how do you do that? To put some more meat on the bone, over at Cumulus Media, the chief insights officer, Pierre Bouvard, has done a lot of great work. In fact, I want to play a little bit from a YouTube video of his a little bit later on. But I'll read this quote in full. Creative generates almost half of sales effect. Way more important than media. Creative is 5 times more powerful than targeting at generating sales. That finding is based on a Nielsen study that analyzed 500 ad campaigns and concluded targeting was only 9% responsible for boosting a brand's sales. Recency was at 5%, had an overall even smaller impact. But what mattered most was the creative. The study concluding 47% of an ad's impact on sales came from how the message was crafted.
Well, a few thoughts on this and then one to the previous topic as well. But the question for me is like, how can you create very meaningful creative if you're not super targeted? If you are trying to reach every single person because targeting doesn't matter so much, like how can you create an effective ad if it's for everybody? Who is it actually for? And that was one thing to me that I couldn't really get past. And I think it was because this stat was so shocking. Like every brand that we work with cares so much about targeting, and everything is laser focused on targeting. I mean, not at our agency, but at many other agencies, like audio ad creative is an afterthought. At Oxford Road, obviously, it's like we're laser focused on that, and it's pivotal to the success of our campaigns. But if you're taking targeting out of the conversation, how do you create effective creative?
Maybe it's less about taking targeting out of the equation, and it's more talking about understanding exactly who it is you're targeting. I don't think anybody's saying one is more important than the other, but I do believe that you can lead as many horses as you want to water, right? You can have the best laid media plan, and you can have worked out exactly what the right amount of money should be to effectively be able to send a message to an audience. But if that message is lackluster, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you could spend a fraction, but with one unbelievably powerful piece of communication, and all the horses are going to drink. So
yeah, I guess like not an audio example, but a really excellent example would be the Dove soap ad from probably 8 years ago, that was breakthrough. And all of a sudden you had people who weren't talking about Dove, who definitely weren't the target end of that Dove creative, feeling the effects of it and really creating like an emotional brand response to it.
Yeah, I think that crosses different media in the sense that the opportunity to stand out is always going to come from your creative, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, yes, you can do things with media. You can set up really interesting media stunts, but it's the end of the day, the consumer, the man on the street, is not. They're all media experts, but they're not media planners. But they can definitely, when they receive the message and it impacts them, they're not worried about how many rating points you purchased, or how your recency plan was structured, or whether you were only buying Friday or Saturday night. They just receive, whether they receive visually or purely on an audio level, it's the power of that message. And I think being able to stimulate an emotion purely through sound has got to be a copywriter who can absolutely nail the idiosyncrasies of audio at the right times to stimulate that emotion.
And to that point, I think like in reading the Odyssey report and reading the Spotify report, I was wondering, like, the main examples they pointed out were the Tostitos that has the sound. It was the Ring doorbell that has the sound. For digital products, like for an Amazon, as an example, like how do you create that bridge? Like how do you bridge the gap from a soundless brand? And I know State Farm, obviously, they've done a really good job with the jingle. They have like a Good Neighbor, State Farm is there, which works really well for home insurance, but it doesn't really work as well for car insurance. And so I guess like when you're thinking about audio or brand identity, when you're thinking about sonic identity and audio logos, like where is the starting point? Like, how do you get down to the DNA if you don't have an audio cue that you can work from? Like, and then going one level deeper, like, have we seen any studies, and it wasn't included in the Spotify study or the Odyssey study necessarily, but what's the perfect combination of like words and sound, or words and a sound? Like, is there a certain number of words that brands should be sticking with? Is it a less is more? Are there audio logos that work really well that, like, I think the MasterCard is just a sound and it doesn't include any words? So like, Stu, you're the expert here in many ways. Like, how are we exploring these types of things?
You hire Barry Manilow. That's who wrote the Like a Good Neighbor, State Farm is there. Isn't that amazing? And he got paid $500. That's what we're going to be talking through. So those are all great questions, Jennifer. As we continue this conversation, those are all the layers and layers of how do we unpack each one of those things as we keep moving through here. So we'll definitely touch on every single one of those things. And Neal, I know when you and I were talking before the show about the impact of just the outsized impact of creative, or maybe it's not outsized, it makes a ton of sense. You'd shared with me that a quote, "Good media can't save bad creative," which I think was kind of what Stephen was saying.
That's my quote, I think.
That's your quote. Okay, I love it. There we go. Neal Lucey's quote, "Good media can't save bad creative."
Yeah, I mean,
I've been working with Neal for the best part of 7 or 8 years, and it was one of the very first things he ever said to me.
So, I mean, it's just, I mean, it's a fact, right? The best media plan cannot overcome creative that doesn't resonate in the marketplace. I mean, it just can't. I mean, it can do a little bit, but your ad campaign will not be as effective if the creative is not worthy. And then on the flip side of that is, if you have iconic creative, the media plan can be so-so, maybe not kind of perfectly targeted, maybe not in all the right channels, but you've got a creative message that breaks through and is going to overcome the deficiencies of the media plan.
It's powerful. It's powerful. And I think, like Jennifer linking that up, earlier, what we're saying, the through line, right? Audio's been an afterthought. Now it's the front of the mind. Okay, well, how do we see that it has a huge impact. Creative has a massive impact. So how do we talk about it? How do we approach it? What is the language? Like I'd mentioned before, is an article that Neal had shared from Ad Age, how your audio ads can benefit from these 4 essential ingredients, which was really unpacking one of the studies that was linked, that will have, all this will be linked as well, the Sound Creative study, the Odyssey and Veritonic study. But there's a quote: "The question on everybody's mind is no longer, should I be using audio, but what should my audio sound like?" which is essentially what you're asking, Jennifer. Said Scott Simonelli, CEO of Veritonic. Love Veritonic. Scott's great. He went on to say, creative testing is an indispensable tool for answering that question, enabling brands to invest in the powerful medium, including sonic logos, music, streaming, podcast, ads, etc. Okay, so just to create some boxes for us to have the conversation, one of the things we're talking about is music. The inclusion of music will boost purchase intent by 5%, and recall by 4%, and energetic emotion by 3%. Just the inclusion of a melody, right, that we can associate to. And that it's like that translates across borders, right? Because music has an emotion to it. Voice ads with multiple voices increase recall by 10%, especially back and forth dialogue, which I found was very interesting. And this is all from the Sound Creative study, excuse me. And then the message. So when ads contain 4 or more brand mentions, purchase intent rises by 4%. And this is where, on this point, I have a quote I want to play here from Pierre Bouvard at Cumulus Media.
This is probably the single most used recommendation. The first 5 seconds matter. Say the name early and often. If you're looking for low-hanging fruit, I want you to listen to all of your radio ads that you have on the air right now. I guarantee you might have some of these ads where you're breaking this rule. Now, in video, it's a common practice to have a 30-second ad with mystery and intrigue, and you have no idea who this ad is for, and only in the last second of the ad does the brand come up. You do that in audio, that is death. So many studies from Nielsen and Veritonic show there's a distinct relationship between recall, brand lift, and how many times you said the brand in the ad.
I could not agree more with that.
Yeah, I mean,
as soon as you hear the Netflix Sonic brand, or an Amazon Prime Sonic brand, or a Visa Sonic brand, or I'm loving it, or let's do it, those individual little milliseconds of sound, because it's not even a full second, right? I'm loving it. It's not even a full second. Just do it. When you hear that, you know where you are immediately. You know what to expect for the next 30 seconds. Your mind gets ready for it. And that's really powerful.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, Pierre mentioned in there, just mentioning your company name. I think it's easy to forget that your company name is an aspect of sonic branding. Say your name early and often. Just simply say Geico presents.
Sure.
The first words of a Geico ad. Geico presents, like Geico.
Gotcha.
Like, so that's another, in case, it's like, well, how do we, to Jennifer's question, really, I'm not an audio brand. I don't have a user interface sound. Where do I even begin? There's lots of great resources, something we'd love to help with. There's ways to approach that. What is the sound? Why do I sound this way? But also, you do have a name. So simply, let's say you're not an audio brand, you can start with another insert company name story, another Oxford Road story. You've gotten an impression of at least your company name. That's one of the tools in the tool chest.
I think that's really important, like starting with the brand name, right? As an audio asset. And I think I think Pierre mentioned, if you can mention the brand name 6 times in the ad, it works better. The the Odyssey study mentions at least 4, so 4 plus. So that's a pretty simple formula if you're writing copy that, in order for this ad to work as hard as it can, I got to mention it 4 times at least.
And that's just in a 30-second spot.
Yeah, but I also think that even beyond just the name of the brand, some of the most famous brands on the planet, which might not even be pure brands, but what we always call, ingredient brands, like a Visa or a MasterCard or an Intel, you don't even need to hear that at the beginning of an ad. You do. That's it. You know where you are. You know exactly what you're talking about.
What's funny is, and I'm not sure if this was an Intel ad or if it was a Dell ad.
Four sounds.
But it didn't have it. It didn't have the Intel Inside Sonic logo, which I was like, how can an ad that features Intel not have that included?
Yeah, and I've actually listened to ads that similar brands have done where they haven't mentioned their brand name, but they've had the Sonic branding, so it doesn't even need it. Anyway, the point is there, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. It's powerful training. And like you had mentioned, Stephen, the duration of time, like you'd said in that study you'd looked at, that's something that Roy Williams out of Austin, Texas, who's done a lot of work in audio as well, talks about, that the time it takes for us to recognize a sound versus the time it takes for us to recognize something visual is a fraction of it. That when we go into audio land, man, we are tuned in fast. The cry of a baby, you think just from a survival standpoint, like we really got to pay attention to what we're hearing.
Well, and I guess I wonder how much is it the combination of the consistency of the combination of words that you're saying versus the consistency of voice. Like in visual ads, you have Flo from Progressive Insurance, and you have the Geico Gecko, and you see the repetitive faces. And in audio, do you need to use the same voice over and over and over again for years, or is it just the recognized combination of words together that can that be as powerful? I assume.
Jennifer, I am so glad you asked, because you have uniquely segued us into a fantastic study that we're going to link from Ipsos Creative about the impact of all these different things. So we'll link the study. I'll just summarize a couple of key points here. What impact does a character have on branded attention? It's got 6 times the impact of nothing at all. A sonic brand cues has the largest impact of all at 8x. A logo by itself, 1x, a slogan, 1x, a logan with a slogan, logan with a logo with a slogan. I just found a new tongue twister.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, exactly. But characters, it's interesting you mentioned characters, and we look at the insurance, look at the insurance advertisers. Characters and then sonic brand cues have the largest impact out of any of these different elements.
All right, so tell me if you've ever heard of any of these companies. Indeed, Shopify, NetSuite, Headspace, Quip, Theragun, Postmates. I'm not only the host of the Media Roundtable, but also CEO of a company called Oxford Road, and we are the world's leading independently owned and operated audio ad agency. And what that means is that we help great companies, many that you have probably heard of on some of the other podcasts that you listen to. We help them test and scale campaigns in audio channels, with podcast being one of those leading channels. Some of the work that we do includes media planning and buying, as well as analytics, attribution, and insights. And we also have a very special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. We have our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. If you're looking to be involved in audio and you want a partner that can help work with you to make sure that you achieve unprecedented ROI and massive scale, you should get in touch with us at Oxford Road. And by the way, the only reason that we're able to do the work of the Media Roundtable is because we have a great team at Oxford Road that supports us and makes it possible. So, what we're doing is not just a podcast, but we're really trying to help brands live out their values and balance that with their business objectives, which is an increasingly hard thing to do in this world of misinformation and malice that's infecting so much of our media. But at Oxford Road, we don't want to just broker this stuff. We want to impact the industry for good. We want to raise the bar on what gets created. And Oxford Road is helping make that possible through the Media Roundtable. So if you're somebody that's interested in working with an ad agency or a partner on this type of work for your advertising campaigns, go to oxfordroad.com. It's easy to spell. And get in touch with us, or at least just sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer. That's oxfordroad.com.
This is Chris Howard, host of Plugged In with Chris Howard. The Kansas City Chiefs are heading to their fourth final in 5 years against a stacked San Francisco 49ers team. Not surprisingly, the Chiefs are currently a 1.5-point underdog. BetOnline is your number one source for up-to-the-minute odds, stats, trends, and lines. You can access the world's best wagering information from your desktop or your mobile device. Head to BetOnline today to stay updated on all the action. BetOnline, the game starts here.
If you travel, you know how to pull off a perfect getaway. You know after you enroll with your Delta SkyMiles Platinum American Express card, you get up to $10 back monthly on U.S. rideshare purchases with select providers, like a car to the airport. You know which remote retreats have the best herbal baths, and where the Wi-Fi password is rarely used, because you're the escape artist. It's why you're a Delta SkyMiles Platinum American Express card member. If you travel, you know. Terms apply. Purchases must be on card. Visit go.amex/you-know.
For those who may be new to this space, Stu, can you explain the difference between sonic branding, DNA brand anthems, taglines, and an audio logo, just from a very top line perspective?
Yes, and I think that these things are also getting defined in the moment, like it is having a moment. To me, what I'm experiencing and seeing being used is sonic branding seems to be the kingdom phylum species. Sonic branding is like all of it. The way I'm choosing to define it is the way that you choose to intentionally and distinctly show up in audio. That is sonic branding. So all things then under that umbrella are sonic branding. That's how I feel like I'm seeing it used in like the working definition I've got. An audio logo is going to be something like the, or the bum 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 bum, or the Netflix ta-dum, some sort of, or what some people are calling an audio icon. So it's a
and that generally does not have words. It's just
correct, like the NBC chimes, bum bum bum. A DNA brand anthem, I think the greatest example is your Home Depot. The Home Depot song, the bum 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 bing bum 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 bum. It just had a moment on TikTok that was awesome, where it's like showing dads being dad-like, like when my dad sees a traffic accident, and it shows the guy walk out into traffic, and he's like stopping traffic, and the Home Depot song's playing underneath it. And then a tagline is just that. I mean, I think it's some collection of 5 to 10 words that is a tagline that can be easily remembered. I don't know. I struggle with that one. Like, does 15 minutes will save you 15% or more on car insurance? Like, is that a tagline? I'm loving it. That's definitely a tagline. But that's kind of how I think of each one of those different things, Jennifer.
The power in that little audio cue is it's you can't measure it enough. It's unfathomable. There's a very interesting documentary on Netflix that I watched recently which showed the power of an audio cue. I'm not gonna reference it on this one because it's rather controversial but funny.
I did want to because there's a couple of things that we talked about, and I think they reference some of the things that Jennifer brought up earlier. One about, like Amazon, if you're not like kind of like, if you're a digital brand, can you create that audio logo? Or and I mean, you look no further than McDonald's with their bada bum bum bum, and then the Home Depot song. I mean, and I think what made those work is commitment, right? I don't think the first time you heard those tones from McDonald's, you necessarily thought, okay, this is McDonald's.
I mean, I didn't think I'm loving it. That's for sure.
So I mean, can't help but think.
So I think there's an element of commitment to that, but it can be done if you find a logo and you commit to it over time, then it will embed itself. And then the Home Depot song, everybody knows it, right? You hear that music, you automatically think of Home Depot. And then and I think even the spokesman.
Yes, it's Josh Lucas. That was the next thing I was going to say, is that's another choice. They've chosen to consistently show up with Josh Lucas, and, more saving, more doing. Doers get more done. They've kind of done the same thing I feel like the Army's done, where it's like they have a really great tagline and then they switch away from it and then they come back. Like the Army's now back to Be All You Can Be. They did Army of One. Now they're back to Be All You Can Be. I think Home Depot swung back to they were doing Doers Get More Done. Now it's I can't even remember.
Well, I think they have like a Builders Get More Done sort
of.
Builders
Get More Done. But yeah, their commitment.
I think what's been evident for me over the past few years is how brands and consultants have begun to, I mean, this was always branding, media planning, comms planning, advertising 101. Never have any dead ends. Always make sure there's connectivity between the different platforms, whether that be in audio, whether that be in visual, whether that be in standard 2D posters or a piece of, visual content on a TV spot. Actually connecting it with a through line, with some obviously the medium, the messaging in a medium is going to be modified slightly, but having that degree of continuity, it sounds like a no-brainer, and it sounds like absolute 101. But it's surprising how many brands didn't used to do that, and now they're actually discovering it. And actually, what shows up in your digital feed is going to also be connected to what you're doing in your OTT or your television. And as a consequence, when you're in your audio, you have to take those cues. You're taking away a fundamental sensory emotion, which is visual cues, right? That means that your audio cues have to work even harder based on what you've done in those other environments. So just making sure there's no dead ends and being able to connect that through line, I think, is so important. And I do think for a while, a lot of advertisers lost that. I know in the gaming world, people were just really playing and saying, oh, we're going to dial up all of the gaming elements of the game in audio, and in visual, we'll show the explosions. But they weren't connecting the branding concept of it. And now they're really beginning to figure that out. And that's how I think you make the whole become greater than the sum of the parts.
Yes, and that's a great resource out there right now. Book I'm listening to is Audio Branding by Lawrence Minsky, Colleen Fahey, and Philip Kotler. I heard about it on 20,000 Hertz. Fabulous show on audio if you're in audio. Their latest episode, Insurance Jingles Why, is a great look at why do insurance companies have the jingles, and just diving into that. And that's where I found out that juicy Barry Manilow tidbit. But continuing the conversation, it's like, okay, well, so what have we done? We're an audio agency. What are we doing, and what have we done in this space? And I think there's a whole lot that can be done. And a lot of times where we sit in the ecosystem, there's a lot of other teams that we have to interface with. But in an audio environment, there's some things that we can help people make choices on. And one of those that we talk about is the founder's voice. A lot of times we've done 50 plus some founder's spokesperson spots, right? The founder's voice is a distinct audio asset. Or like I said, one that I want to talk about is with Shopify. In working with Shopify, as we're looking at how are they going to show up in audio, they've got a very distinct cha-ching sound that is actually in their app. That is what happens when you make a sale. And that's so powerful, right? Because you make that first sale, that in and of itself is such a reward. And as you continue to make sales, that's something that we chose to integrate into their audio campaign, having that cha-ching sound. And like, kind of like the stuff that we're talking about is like, there does seem to be almost an embarrassingly no duh aspect to some of this stuff. But I think sometimes that's, Neal and I were talking before the show, what makes an insight is that it feels no duh after the fact. It's like, well, of course. But even in working with all the podcast networks and the radio networks with Shopify, we insisted that they all integrate that sound effect into their reads so that the host can interact with it and interface with it. And that's become a real anchor around their audio campaign, is simply using that sound that was already showing up in their app.
I think you got to take some credit there, Stu, because it is taking something that was already existing and then saying, we got to use this.
Well, I got to say, it's the teamwork that makes the dream work at Oxford Road. That's always the truth. And massive, our creative lead on that account, and has really been key in helping mold how they're showing up in audio, is Shelby Craig. And so Shelby was a big part, and Paul Payne, to creatives and strategists, strategic creatives that went down a level to think. And then it's like, it feels no duh, but it's not no duh.
Yeah.
Well, and this might be a no duh, but when it comes to mentioning the brand 4 times in a 30-second spot, when you're playing an audio jingle or an audio logo, do you have to approach it the same way, or is once enough?
That is a great question. I think for us, where we've landed on it is that we do our best to bookend, using it at the beginning and the end. But as far as like a distinct study I could point to, or even in the stuff that I've been listening to recently, that isn't something offhand that I know, but it does. I have had the idea that I would love to do a spot that's just cha-chings.
But I mean,
Shopify, cha-ching,
Shopify,
like cha-ching, Shopify, cha-ching.
It would be like the QR code of the Super Bowl last year.
Pure cha-ching for 30
similar
seconds.
Yeah.
You're dealing with audio cues that trigger very powerful emotions. Like when you hear a song, you can remember where you first heard that song or what it meant to you in that moment. You're just taking that, you're using that as an insight and an observation and turning it into something really powerful for a brand. And there's nothing more satisfying in the commercial world of hearing a cash register close, right? And it's just a no-brainer. As you say, there's a lot of kind of, excuse my profanity, no shit Sherlock statements on this particular episode of Media Roundtable, but they're true. The power of audio is what goes in that ear and what emotion it triggers in a millisecond. And I say millisecond without using any hyperbole, because again, the Intel 4 bars are so powerful. The Visa, and many others.
I mean, that Netflix to dumb. Everybody knows what they're getting to.
YouTube.
They're getting ready for. Neal, did you have something?
I mean, not much more. I mean, I think we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but especially for, I think, DTC brands, a lot of brands that are mission-based, a lot of brands where the founder is directly involved in that business, how distinct that can be to really separate your brand from the category, and just how important that is. I think consumers will relate to the fact that this is something that was invented or kind of brought to market by an individual, and that individual is really, in a lot of ways, oftentimes the best spokesperson for the brand that you're trying to sell.
And that's, in audio, I think of currently like Moink, with founder as spokesperson, Bambi, founder as spokesperson. One that I think back on is Boll & Branch Sheets that we had for a number of years. and it was the founder, spokesperson, and it just sort of struck us one day that it's like, oh, the founder, Scott, and at first it was Scott and Missy Tannen, but then it primarily was Scott Tannen. That's the distinct sonic asset. His voice in Sirius XM, and then him delivering a tagline, loved by 3 U.S. presidents. The sheets loved by, it was like, oh. So it's almost, you know, when we're working with brands, it's like, hey, take a pause, Shopify or Indeed or whoever it is. Let's look at what you do have. We might already have some of these things. We're not necessarily at a standing start to begin doing some sonic branding work with you.
Yeah, and I think that distinctiveness too. I mean, if you've read How Brands Grow or read snippets of it, which I sort of have done over and over again, I admit, and really like finding those distinct assets, right? Kind of doing an audit. What are the distinct assets that we can take advantage of? If you have a founder involved in your brand, that's a distinct asset. That's something that can, you know, hopefully be taken advantage of. But really kind of figuring out what those distinctive assets are and then making sure you use them.
Well, and similarly or complementary, but also pretty shocking to me, one of the distinct assets, according to the Odyssey report, was disclaimers, and how the use of disclaimers actually really helps in sell-through, and you'll have a greater response. And I again, everybody can read it when we link the notes, but that caught me completely off guard. And some of the points were, again, like, obviously looking back, it makes perfect sense, but like, people trust your brand more if you tell them what can go wrong. And so all of the elements that in regards to distinct assets, you could think of them as a negative, but they would actually be positive if used in the correct way.
That was one that jumped out at me as well. The disclaimer thing, but in a sense, I guess, you know, you are leaning into an objection. And that does, you know, that's kind of a sales 101, a lot of this stuff, but to lean into that. So I think, you know, another thing I was thinking about with this is that, in a sense, a distinctness of this, and we talk about, you know, saving the live reads, and something that we've done, or in a way, the way it's related is, you know, our work with Indeed. In small things and sort of the no-duh things of audio that aren't. If you go out and you listen, and I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen to air checks weekly from different advertisers, something that we applied with Indeed that was a small thing that had a big impact was customizing by genre the live reads of those hosts. And I think, you know, it can almost be taken for granted. Oh, it's intimate, it's podcast, it's just talking points. Again, sort of audio as an afterthought. Another piece of your sonic branding, so to speak, is what are those talking points you're giving those hosts? And have you made it easy for them to go in and make a customization to be speaking from their genre and go right into talking about your product to their audience?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the one thing about that is you could, that insight being obvious after you hear about it, right? And then you hear, oh, you know, customizing your copy for genre, like that seems fairly obvious. But did anybody do that prior? Right. So, yeah, it is obvious in retrospect.
We're going to stop here and now have a commercial break, and then we come back, which is basically people switch off rather than being through osmosis brought into a discussion. Yeah.
And I think likewise in both of those studies from Odyssey and from Spotify, I mean, you know, the Spotify was interesting because it's like people will consume different content where they're doing different activities. So you can take advantage of that. If they're walking, they're more likely to take, you know, conversational content will work in that kind of instance, and probably listening to a podcast on their walk, right? Or if they're, you know, listening to energizing music, you can probably, you know, you can probably figure out that they're doing an activity that's energizing, maybe working out. So there's so much opportunity to just take advantage of those, how people consume audio and likely what they're doing when they're consuming audio and matching messages to those environments.
Exactly. And that's something we strive to do. I mean, I think that's, to make it a bit of an advertisement for Oxford Road is that we take this deadly serious. And so those are the things that we look to do, like in the case with Indeed, and with Shopify, of going, how can we think hard about this and not just treat it as an afterthought?
Yeah, I would say I wanted another plug on that, and it is a plug for Oxford Road, is if you're disconnected from the media plan, and you may not, like if you're the creative working on that copy and you're disconnected from the media plan, maybe you don't know the genres that you're advertising in. And so you don't have that aha to like, oh, they're running in sports, I should tailor my copy to that environment.
But of course, that never happens here at Oxford Road. And indeed, in the next edition of Media Roundtable, we're going to have our own sonic branding, as we do.
Exactly. If it's good for the gander, it's good for the goose.
Well, I mean, for me, the sonic logo is obviously, whenever I have a meeting with you, it's dreamwork makes the team work. I get it.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. I'll wrap it up.
And we can defensively own that one for sure. Stew created it in-house.
Right. Hey, all the best ideas. Okay. So this has been a great conversation. We definitely want to do more of these. I think we can dig even deeper into the work that we're
surface and not.
Yeah, I think this could have been a 2-hour.
And I mean, we probably haven't even come across any major eureka moments, but it is such a rich vein of discussion. We can definitely do another one.
Yes, and we should, and we'll end this episode out. I'll close it out, and then for those of you listening, you can hear an example of a few spots where we've applied some of these principles. And I just want to say in closing a couple of things. Like, look, in audio, it can be radio super efficient, and with streaming these days, you can target as narrowly or as broadly as you want. But the point is, you can run a test, and it doesn't have to run very long to deploy some dollars to get some learnings. And just to quote an often a titan of industry, Jeff Bezos, in talking about testing. Amazon's Jeff Bezos explains the power of experimentation on the basis of a truncated outcome distribution. If you fail while experimenting, there is a cap downside. However, unlike baseball, where the most runs a player can ever get when they step up to the plate is 4, when we experiment, we can have 1,000% return on our business. And it's the advertisers, like you'll hear a Tommy John sample in this spot, that are began and are continuing to explore sonically, just in the power of music, and using an old Christmas song and making it a Tommy John Christmas song for the holiday season, where they're experimenting. The more we can experiment, and audio actually makes that something that you can do rapidly and learn quickly. Not sure what sonic logo you can try. For the few people that are going to hear it, you could try 3 different ones. If you get some indication on which direction to dig, we can start digging. We can be thoughtful in how we approach it. But there's a way to experiment in audio where you can experiment rapidly, because the upside can be so massive, which is something that we've seen with our advertisers. Thank you all for joining the Media Roundtable Industry Edition. Like you guys said, we just scratched the surface. We'll definitely be coming back to talk more about sonic branding. There's no question. Media Roundtable is a show that is still dedicated to our mission of mobilizing marketers to advance truth and civility in journalism. And our Industry Edition gives you the tools to make that possible. We want you not just to know the news and best practices, but use it for good. If you're a marketer looking to balance business objectives with your brand values and want a team who can make your campaign successful through the right strategies, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road, by visiting oxfordroad.com. And definitely we link these studies, and we'll have more. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. Thank you to our guests, Stephen, Neal, Jennifer, and to Bianca, Kyle, Haley, and the team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly. All right, everybody, thanks again for listening. And if you're here at the very end, enjoy the latest Oxford Road produced audio sizzle.
Shopify doesn't mind if you're at sea level or on top of the world. You can run and grow your business anywhere.
I'm Alan Jones, and I created Bambi specifically for small business, all so you can put your HR on autopilot.
Don't miss Blinds.com the musical with the smash hit Keep It Simple Susan.
Keep it simple, Susan. Order from Blinds.com.
We believe that doing the right thing leaves a great taste in your mouth, which is why I guarantee you're fixing to say, oink, oink, I'm just so happy I got moinked.
Tommy John is rearing in this softness season with a gift to those who made my nice list.
Get Tommy John for comfort and joy.
If you travel, you know when it comes to love.
See you soon.
Can't wait. The sky is no limit. You know with your Delta Amex card, being oceans apart means meeting in Aruba. And booking award travel with your card means saving 15% on Delta flights. You know kissing under the bridge of sighs guarantees eternal love. Because you're the long-distance lovebirds. It's why you're a Delta SkyMiles Platinum American Express card member. If you travel, you know. Take off 15 discount not applicable to partner-operated flights or taxes and fees. Terms apply. Visit go.amex/you-know.
McDonald's presents Burger Reviews by Hamburglar. Today's review, the classic Big Mac, Hamburglar. Robble, robble. He said, there's more sauce in every bite. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Brabble. Available at most restaurants in this area.